Okay, so I just want for any of you that don't know Aubri already, Aubrey's been in the business for quite a while, and I think she's probably going to let us know a little summary of that. But I love the way that she views things, because she's always looking ahead and looking at today at the same time, which is a very spectrum global kind of thinking. And then she's also had that most people don't have all three of these things, being finite, spectrum, and global, which is like, I can see a big picture, I know how I'm going to get there, and I'm willing to do the little pieces, or else have somebody else help me do them. And that combination, I think, makes for the kind of information that Aubri uses and is more than generously willing to share. So I asked her if she would do this, and she was more than willing to do it. And I just want you to know, Aubri, how much we appreciate this. So if you guys can even just glean one little piece out of this that you can operate your business better with, I think you will have spent a very good 1 hour, and also learn a little bit more about one of your co-workers here. So thanks, Aubri, and take it, go.
Well, thank you guys. I missed you guys a bunch, and I get to see Julie every once in a while in the office, and Jay and stuff, and that just makes my day. So I'm glad to see all you guys. So whenever I go to real estate conferences and stuff like that, I am unfortunately the person that's like, come on, let's get to the good stuff. So I'm not going to have a lot of buildup today. I thought we would just bullet point this whole thing, just some stuff that's kind of popped up for me in the last couple of years. So there's not going to be a lot of finesse to this. I apologize. We're just going to jump right in. I'm really hoping you guys can offer back some things that you've learned. I'd love to mooch some ideas off of you too. So about half of this is going to be focused on seller ideas, and the other half is going to be buyer, and then maybe just a little splash of other real estate activities you can do to start your own real estate empire as well. So I think Carol wanted me to talk about some cool stuff I learned this year. I kept it to 10. So we're going to bounce around a lot. Carol, you're just going to keep track of the chat stuff for me so I don't get too distracted here. Okay, guys, so I sent you some stuff last week. So I have that here in front of me. I'm in the office, so I can pull it up again. So don't worry about having that in front of you. But the first thing I wrote down that has helped me this year is to grow my agent and my client following. So every time there we go. Every time I meet with a potential client for the first time, a buyer or seller, right after I leave the meeting, the first thing I do is go stalk them on social media and request their friendship on Facebook, and also try to follow them on Instagram. I do that before writing them a thank you note or anything like that. That helps me to know what's going on in their life, learn a little bit more about them. I feel like you have to be a bit of a chameleon in this business. So when you're talking to a potential client, you want to match their tone, know if you have any similar interests. I tend to talk really quickly. And so I try to learn about people. And if they talk a bit slower, I try to slow myself down. So following them on social media helps you learn a little bit more about them. Plus, it's a great way for me to keep in touch with my clients throughout the year, where if they've had a baby or if they have a wedding anniversary or anything like that, you can send them a little love note to celebrate that for them. I also mentioned grow your agent following. Whenever I have an agent request a showing or we do a deal together, I go ahead and put them in my phone right away, and I write little notes about them in the name that I have them assigned to in my phone. So most people have great notes in there, but I do have a couple of people that I've written in my phone as I never want to work with this person ever again. But when that agent calls and I answer the phone with, hey, Jessica, how are you doing? It's so good to hear from you. It really sets a tone, and it makes your potential transaction a lot easier. So just really simple things, but it's helped create more warmth in my business with agents and with clients. I also I sent you guys a picture of my pending board. I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to flip it around. Hopefully you can see this a little bit. So, oh gosh, sorry. So back there's my pending board. Oh, this is not working. So what I do is keep track of all of my pendings and potential business on that board. And that has been a lifesaver for me. No matter how hard I try, I can't ever keep all of my information on an Excel spreadsheet. I need something tangible that I can be on the phone and turn around and look and make sure that everything's there. So on that pending board, I have the client's name, the address that is under contract, the agent that I'm working with and their phone number, the lender, so it's the bank that they work for, the name of the lender, and then the lender's contact number, the title company, the closer, and the phone number of that person, the inspection company, the date that it's going to happen and the time it's going to happen, a warranty if it's happening, it's the company name, and then if it's been ordered, yes or no, because a lot of times we get confused, like did the buyer's agent order it, did the seller's agent order it. I also have the termite company up there with the date that the inspection will happen, and then the status of if it's come back all clear or if we have termite issues. The appraisal, so the name of the appraiser, the date it's happening, and then the status. And in status, I just like to write the words value good, no repairs. Hopefully that means we've got a good appraisal. The next column is closing. So I write down the date, the time, and the location of the closing. Next column is a change of address and utilities. So reminding my clients to do that on the day of closing. The next column is the walkthrough, the date and time of that. And then the last two are one's titled submitted to, and it has a line for lender, title, and client, meaning did all people get copies of the contract that needs them. And the final column is my database entry. So did I put these people in my Buffini database, and have I put them on my Excel spreadsheet that I use to forecast all of my sales? So that board has been so helpful to me. I started using it at CBS Home, and it's such a great way to make sure that I'm keeping on top of things, especially during appraisal time. All of our appraisals are running really long. And when you have, 2, 3, 4 pendings or more going at a time, I never remember that stuff, and I'm really bad at it. So it's great to have a visual, have that all in one location. You guys are absolutely welcome to come copy and look at this if you feel like this is something that's going to help you in your work. This also helps me a lot during double closing. So if I have a client who's selling their house, turning around and buying one, man, keeping track of those like walkthroughs, change of address and utilities and closing times, I always screw up. So this has been really helpful for me. Then I sent you guys little examples of these gonna buy and gonna sell notebooks that I just started making this year. These have been really helpful actually. So these help me with potential clients that are coming up. So if I have an initial buyer's appointment or a CMA, I just go ahead and sticky tack those little notebook sheets to the bottom of my pending board. So that way I have all of my business in one location, my pendings, any potential clients coming up. I take notes on these. The gonna sell ones are the one I really want to point out here. So on here, it's, obviously got the name, the address that I'm looking at, the date that I've done the CMA, the goal of date of when they want to list. Then I have to keep track of myself. Again, if you have more than a couple of listings going at one time, it's super easy to get lost in what you were supposed to do. I can't tell you how many times a photographer's shown up to a house before I made these and they're like, where's the lockbox? And I'm like, crap, do you have a keypad code to get in? So this keeps me on top of when everything's happening. Putting the lockbox up, hey, we had it pre-inspected and gone through the results of that. When's our staging equipment?
Zoom meeting with Mike and Phil the other day.
I heard somebody. There we go. If the photos have been scheduled, Matterport, and then when's my listing appointment? When's the actual paperwork getting signed? This has been a huge help for me because then I just have this little column on my pending board that says sell, and I just have all my potential sellers coming up. That way I can keep an eye on who's, when do they want to list their house by and keep in touch with them. I'm really embarrassed to admit how many of my potential listings or potential buyers have slipped through the cracks because I just didn't remember and just didn't follow up. Kelly was asking why pre-inspect. So I'm such a big baby about this. I love pre-inspections. I started doing them maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And I've heard some arguments against it. Totally respect those arguments. I think one of them has been why would you do that now? Because it's a seller's market. You don't even need to do it because people are buying homes as is. Kelly, that's like perfect timing for your question because you're segueing into the next topic I wanted to discuss. So when I'm going to list a home, I have now made a systematized plan for implementation. And obviously the first thing is going to be doing a market analysis, going out to the house. I do warn my clients that it takes me a little bit longer to get my homes ready to sell. So it usually takes me about 2 weeks to get everything ready to go for a sign to be stuck in the yard. And usually the pre-inspection is the biggest reason for that. So when I sit down at a table with a client, I tell them, hey, you've probably heard it's a seller's market. And I flat out say this sentence: a head of lettuce can sell a house right now. It is not hard. But what is hard is keeping the seller in control of the deal the entire time, and also giving them all of the money that they were promised initially with the initial purchase agreement. So we have buyers now that are losing out on 2 or 3 or 4 homes by the time they get an offer to stick. And at that point, they're like, I don't care, do whatever it takes, offer over asking, no inspect, whatever, just get the house. So when they get that house under contract, that is a perfect recipe for buyer's remorse. And usually the best way for them to get out of a contract is that inspection. So what I like to do is establish control at the beginning for the seller and maintain it throughout by significantly reducing or even eliminating that buyer's negotiation power. So I think the pre-inspection is a really important part of that. So what I do is, before we get the house listed, I have a pre-inspection done. I always use the same guy. I believe it's important to have someone who's experienced, local, and the same person every time for consistency. So we get that pre-inspection done, and I tell the seller there's going to be stuff that pops up. We may decide to do absolutely nothing, but at least we know the true condition of the home, and we can do 2 things with that information. We can say, okay, now we know the real condition of the home is, we can price it accordingly, and we can also sell the home as is. I let the sellers know, even if we get an absolutely perfect contract for $500,000 cash and we want to close whenever, I still write counter verbiage in any perfect contract to the buyer. So I write 2 things. I write home is sold as is, even if they want to do another inspection. I always say home is sold as is, or I might use the verbiage. It sounds prettier than what I'm going to say, but basically it says, yeah, buyer, you can get another inspection if you want to, but we'll only consider negotiating items newly discovered from your home inspection. So what that does is encourages the buyer to not do a whole bait and switch with their offer. I really can't stand when buyers write an offer on a house and then they use the home inspection to just beat down that seller by either wanting them to take the price down or saying, yeah, I want you to fix these 18 things before I'm willing to move on. The other sentence I put into counter verbiage is, should the appraised value differ from the purchase price, buyer agrees to pay the difference at closing. So knock on wood, I haven't had any low appraisals this year, but this year's been the perfect formula to have low appraisals since we've had houses sell for over asking. And I want to weed out any gotchas at the very beginning of the contract. So I just had this example last week. I had a house listed for 180 and we had a buyer come in at 185. And I put that sentence in there. I said, should the appraised value differ from the purchase price, buyer agrees to pay the difference at closing. And all of a sudden the buyer's like, whoa, I don't, and so I want to weed those buyers out right away. You told my seller you're going to pay 185. We're going to give them 185 all the way to the end. So really went a long way to answer your question, Kelly. That pre-inspection is just a way to give you an anchor for your asking price and also eliminate or significantly reduce that buyer's negotiating power so they can't use that information against you. A lot of times when our sellers are selling their house and it's under contract, they're off looking for a new home. I don't want any home inspection issues on my listing to jeopardize that future home sale for my sellers. So a lot of reasons why I do it. Let's see. Carol, we got some more questions here. Should I be answering those now? Let's see. From Kathy, do you have the buyer show up front the proof of funds to pay the difference between the purchase price and appraisal? No, Kathy, I don't. They just have to have those funds available. So, they're signing their name to a legal document saying that they will kick those funds in for the difference. I have had buyers counter my counter by saying, yeah, I'll do that, but only up to a certain amount. Like maybe they'll only do up to a $5,000 difference. So I just want to give my seller a very clear picture of what they're going to be accepting as an offer. Chad says, do you try and verify funds to make sure the buyers have the cash to pay the difference and it doesn't appraise? Sorry, same question. No, and I've never had an issue with it. Maybe I'm being a little naive there, but I haven't had a problem with that yet. Okay, guys, so back to this little listing booklet here. So I've got this systematized listing plan for implementation that I said it takes about 2 weeks. What it starts with is obviously the market analysis, where I have the seller price their own home. We can talk about that, and that's kind of another class in itself. But I have them price their own home. And then I say, okay, first thing we need to do is get your pre-inspection done. That usually takes about a week and a half. We get the results, we discuss the findings. Maybe it's a couple of free or low cost items that they can fix on that pre-inspection to, you know, make their house more saleable. Or maybe it's a major thing, like we have street creep and we need to get a bid from a concrete contractor to supply to the buyer before any showings exist. I also then set up a staging appointment. I pay for that as part of my service as a listing agent. And the next, scheduling photos, Matterport, and I also do 2D architectural drawings for my sellers. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, like when you're looking at a listing online and you're like, click, click, okay, I know where I'm at, I'm on the main floor, and then all of a sudden you get a little bit lost. You're like, oh wait, am I in a bedroom? Am I in a den? Where am I at? So that 2D architectural floor plan has really been helpful to keep buyers' heads clear when they're looking at the photos online. In addition to that, it also places the room measurements within those actual bedrooms, living rooms, or whatever. It shows how the door swings open, where windows are at in the wall. I always tell sellers, my goal is I want buyers to make the decision to purchase your home while they're in their jammies looking at their iPad. Coming to the house is just a formality. So I want to give them all the information they need. If they have a crazy amount of huge bedroom furniture, and that's the specific reason they're moving to a house because they want to make sure that ginormous dresser fits in the bedroom, they have those room measurements and how those walls sit at their convenience. So especially in the time of COVID, you want to try to minimize the amount of unnecessary showings as possible. So I think those 2D drawings are really great to do that. And Better Homes and Gardens has been very generous in allowing us to use the showing service for all of our listings. So obviously I do that as well. So any questions about that kind of brief 2-week time period on what it takes to get a home ready for sale? Okay, who is your vendor that creates the 2D drawings? Her name, I can send that information out to everybody. I just started working with her name, Jana. I've heard excellent things about, obviously, Matt. He's awesome. And Aubri takes great photos too. But Jana's the gal that's been doing those 2D drawings for me, and I can send that information out after class.
Are you doing virtual tours, like any combination of all that as well?
Yeah, no matter the price point, I always do Matterport, the high definition photos, and then the 2D architectural drawings with room measurements inside. I get the house professionally measured as well.
Can you speak a little bit, because I know what you do with pre-inspections, can you speak a little bit to who pays for that and how that process goes? Really
good question. So I pay for that as part of my marketing. However, I don't pay for it up front. If I have 7 listings at one time, I don't want to have $500 a pop all over town. And then what if somebody cancels their listing with me? So I just tell sellers, what I ask is that you pay for it up front, and then I reimburse you that exact amount out of commission. I have a commission adjustment form that I have them sign prior to closing and submit to the title company. So the commission is reduced by the $500 or whatever it may be. I feel like that $500 pays for itself time and time again, because it's saving me hours of negotiation on home inspection repairs. And quite frankly, I mean, even if everything goes perfectly for a seller, selling your house sucks. It's so miserable. So if we can take out that big lump in the real estate throat for the seller, let's do it.
Also, a little bit, can you speak a little bit to your what you do with that pre-inspection with your clients? Because some people do a pre-inspection and then they don't do anything with it, some of the sellers. And then there are sellers that go through like we do. We'll have a seller go through and pick the things that they're going to fix and we'll make note on that and have that pre-inspection available or also up in docs. But there's other ways that people do that and without scaring the the potential at that point, the potential seller.
Yeah.
So
it's great that you do that. You guys have probably been seeing more listings around town, other brokerages doing pre-inspections. So again, Better Homes and Gardens is going to have to be the teacher of these other agents to show them here's how we do it. And it's been really effective. So for my sellers, I provide the entire report on the Associated Docs for any buyer's agents or buyers to see, along with a copy of the summary pages with notes made and or bids or paid receipts from licensed technicians of work that has been done. So there's proof of that work being done properly. If it's something that's just like a handyman fix or the seller can do it themselves, I just simply write the word fixed right next to it. And then that way the buyer is armed with that information the first time they go in the home, so they can double check the repairs that are handyman like. And then they also have the receipts of the work that have been done by professional contractors.
Nice.
Jay has a question. Are you doing 7% when you offer these services?
I've caved. I've gone to 6%. I feel like this year and last year have been my years of systematizing everything and reducing my expenses significantly. Mm-hmm. So I think up until a couple of years ago, I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. Now I'm very precise about the money that I spend. And it's taken me 12 years to finally decide, okay, I'm going to spend these last 2 years learning where my money makes the most sense. So I run my business very cheaply, and I feel it very efficiently. Plus Jenny Wilson, oh my God, I don't know what I'd do without that woman. She's incredible. She has just changed my whole professional and personal life. So she has been a phenomenal help in getting my business streamlined and ran cheaply.
For those of you who don't know, Jenny Wilson is her assistant.
Yeah, stay away from her, you guys.
So
she's mine. I love her.
Nobody else can have her.
No. So we were kind of talking a little bit about listing stuff. I have this year started throwing in cancellation clause in all of my listing contracts. And it reads just like this. Should seller choose to cancel this listing agreement prior to the expiration date or successful closing of an accepted contract, seller agrees to pay listing broker / listing agent $900 for time and services rendered in preparing the home for market. So I haven't had anybody cancel, but you know, one cancellation is enough. I think Kristen, you were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We put a lot of money and time into getting the house ready for sale. And then we're just kind of left holding the bag. You know, if somebody decides they're going to live there forever after all. So I just factored in what my cost is for getting those photos taken, Matterport, all that stuff. Jenny obviously invests some time into getting a listing ready for sale. And then my time's important too. I think a lot of times we just discount our services down to $0. That's not okay. So I've just started putting a cancellation clause into all of my listing contracts.
Hey, Aubri, when we're finished with this, can you send me some of those statements that you're quoting right now? I'm trying to make notes to send them, but
you got it. It's going to be really ugly notes, but yeah, I'll send them right over.
Okay. I'll interpret them and resend them out.
All right. I'm going to look at these questions here. Oh, Jenny is the best. Yes, absolutely is. Okay, guys. So unless you have any questions about that, I'm going to do my little crazy jumping all over the place here, if that's okay. Okay, so we told the seller at the beginning, hey, we want you to be in control. We want you to maintain that control all the way through the listing process. So another thing that I've been putting into contracts, if I don't get a chance to talk to the buyer's agent when they're writing it, I will counter with having 1 day of post occupancy after closing. A lot of my clients now are in the time of their life where they're selling a home and moving to a next one. And typically what we have is our sellers closing on a house with their entire life in a moving van, charging them $300 an hour and sitting there and waiting until they can close on their next house, and they rush everything into the new home. So what's really been helpful, and especially since it's a seller's market, we should take advantage of it, is if your seller's closing on October 23rd, make the occupancy for the buyer be the 24th at 5 p.m. That just gives the seller a whole day to breathe and then clean and patch and paint. Because how many times do we get cranky phone calls from the other agent? Like there's holes in the wall and the paint doesn't match. So this is just a good day of breath for everyone. And I haven't had anybody ask me for a post-occupancy agreement. I don't know if that's just because buyers are kind of bending over backwards right now, but if you need one, you need one. Questions on that? Okay. Let's see. What else do I have here? Oh, good gravy. I'm sure you guys have seen this. So double and triple check your contracts right now. I always go through the contract line by line with client, seller, or buyer, whether it's their first home or their 20th home they've sold. And I know it takes time, guys, but it's really important to do this. How many times have you had a client say, well, I didn't know we had to give the fridge in the basement? They really deserve to have you read through that contract with them. They're paying us a lot of money. And the least we can do is take a half an hour, 45 minutes to go through that contract. I'm very conversational in how I talk about it. You know, for example, the paragraph in our contract that says you can't discriminate against any of the protected classes, I just shorten it to, this paragraph says don't be a jerk and discriminate against anybody. Like, make it personal to you, so it's you speaking the contract, but cover that whole thing with them. We have had a huge influx of new agents into the market in the last 3 years, and boy, does it show, unfortunately, sometimes in the contracts that we receive. They haven't had the benefit of good training like we have here. So really, you have to check all that stuff. There's blank lines that they're not filling in. It's just a really good idea to do that. Let's see here. Oh, and on that note, you should always be checking your closing statements too, and your title commitments to see if there's any defects on the title. If you choose to do pre-inspections for your sellers and you're going to have them, if you're going to pay for those out of the commission, make sure you check those settlement statements to see that that commission has been deducted properly and the sellers are getting the proper amount. Okay, I think too, especially as a listing agent, when I have 3 or 4 contracts come in on a listing, I really pay attention to who that agent is that's writing the offer and how they're filling out that contract. This sounds so dumb, but this is my control freak OCD issue that I need to work through. When agents write me an offer and there's that buyer agent info and the seller agent info, fill both of those out for the agent. It saves them time. It shows that you have attention to detail. Please make sure that you're offering the right earnest deposit. I really suggest a 1% earnest deposit to show that you're serious. I have had contracts come across my desk that make me give them a stink eye and throw a little hissy fit because they're writing a $500 earnest deposit on a house that's $300,000. I'm like, are you kidding me? What that tells me is that I'm going to have to hold this agent's hand through this whole process and make sure that they're doing everything right. So just start off on a good foot. Good earnest deposit, fill every blank out, fill out the buyer and seller agent info. I think that just makes you guys shine.
I think that's probably one of the best points we could make right now. I'm really getting tired of educating these other agents on $1,000 on $300,000 or $400,000 offers is like, and we just actually lost this kind of a side note. We just actually had an offer and they put $1,000. It was a $330,000 house. We came in our counter, which was not a terrible counter. We came back with that they had to increase their earnest money, and they pulled out, said, no, we don't want to do it. And the agent was like, I've never heard of that.
They've never heard of that in the 3 deals that they've done in their entire career. That's
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which makes the point of when you're looking at I think you can speak to this too, is the things that you look at when you get an offer, and one of them being the agent on the other side and their history. So
that's where your little notes in your phone come in.
I think that's
have a nice name for someone or a mean name for someone in my phone.
Hey, Aubri, I have a quick question. It's Peter Manhart.
Hey, Pete.
And about not just about something, I don't know if we're still on that topic, but it's a different topic. But as far as the appraisal goes, I think, and not the appraisal, as far as the earnest of money goes, there's very few ways to tell whether you're working with cash poor people on the buy side or not when you're in the seller. And so you have to, I just think that when people write low earnest deposits, it just tells me that they're cash poor. And if I have multiple offers, the absolute last person I want to work with is a cash poor person. Because whenever you call a lender, have you ever called a lender and said, these people are broke and they don't have any money? No, every single lender tells you, oh yeah, these guys are golden. I mean, every single lender is going to tell you that. So it almost, it's irrelevant because they can't say anything different than that. So really earnest deposit is something I think it really sends a signal. Anyway, my point was about the appraisal. Earlier, you mentioned 185, you got an offer for 185 on a 180 house, and you countered back and said, if it's low, they're going to come up with the cash. That's what I'm running into is that as a buyer, I have a buyer who's approved to 180, but if the earnest deposit comes in at 160, there's almost nobody in that price range that's going to be able to come up with $25,000 in cash. So what we're running into, and we even talked to a buyer's agent on that. And you know what the buyer's agent, we said, we noticed you didn't say anything about that it's contingent on an appraisal. And they said, well, it's contingent. And this is an agent who's been in the business almost 20 years. I said, well, it's contingent on financing. So it's contingent on an appraisal. Because if they can't come up with the money, then, but isn't that awesome to know as a seller that, a few days before closing, because I have a closing on the 16th or the 18th or whatever, and I still don't have the appraisal back, by the way. So, you know what I mean? So what they're basically saying is that a few days before closing, I'm going to learn that this guy doesn't have the money to make up the difference. So, and we keep losing on offers, and Jen and I are turning to each other and saying, what do we do? It's a predicament. I mean, there is a thought out there in the marketplace that says, I don't have to make it contingent on the appraisal because it's contingent on financing. And if they can't come up with the money, then they wouldn't be approved to buy the home and they would have an out. So I think there's a lot of gray areas. And when you put in, especially new agents who, you know what I mean? Now you're putting in people that don't even know what they don't know. And it's a tricky time right now with homes going way over list. And I keep telling my buyers, we cannot do it, guys. We cannot make it. We have to make it contingent on an appraisal because this is a legal document and you're tied to it. And you know what I mean? But there are we get so many offers on our listings that there's no mention of appraisal. And you just wonder, they're putting 5% down and there's no mention of an appraisal. So, you know what I mean? If they're putting 50% down, I get it. But
Aubri, can you speak to that?
Well, first of all, hopefully your clients, you're not the first agent they've had, because I don't think they have any idea how protected they are with you as an agent by putting all these safeguards in place for them. But Tom, I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say, because Pete, I don't put verbiage in my contracts of contingent upon successful appraisal, because that agent you're just making fun of, that's me. I'm like, there's a financing contingency in there. So I don't put it in.
I wasn't making fun of them.
But I try to keep, as a buyer's agent, the contracts as clean and kiss butt as possible. So maybe I'm messing up there. What do you think, Tom?
No, it is tricky. The dialogue is fantastic. By the way, this is just for such great dialogue. And Aubri, you've done an amazing job. This is really great stuff. I've already learned a bunch of stuff. I'll tell you this. So this is my position on it. And Pete, you're right. It is gray. But my argument is that if indeed the down payment and ultimately the financing terms were not material to the contract, then why is there a section that defines it? For example, there's the financing section that specifically states what the interest rate can't exceed and what the down payment is, and how much is being financed and what have you. Now, it doesn't specifically talk about what the down payment is. It talks about the amount that's being financed. But what you alluded to earlier, but it does speak to the terms of the financing. And what you alluded to earlier was, in the event that they don't have the cash, they can't close. To Aubrey's point, I think that unfortunately, even though it would be wonderful to be able to have a very honest approach to everything as we embark upon our our endeavors as it relates to real estate, and we should to a certain extent have that approach, we can't define what the appraisal is going to be until it's in. So I think from a practical standpoint, it's unrealistic for us to put the property must appraise and not fall back on that financing contingency. I think that it'll cost us the ability to win more and more. It is really unclear, and it hasn't been litigated. And I have fought it on our behalf on both sides, either way, lots and lots of times. And I think that I have landed on that the financing contingency in the event that the property does not appraise, and in the event that the buyer would be forced to come up with cash, my position is that's a material change in the contract, and the buyer's financing contingency would be valid in that circumstance. That is the way an attorney has evaluated it for me. I've had 2 attorneys say they agree with that. I've had 1 attorney say not so sure, coin flip. So I'm at kind of 2-0 and 1 is kind of where I'm at with it. And so that's my take on it. It doesn't mean I'm right, but of course it never gets litigated because it's never worth quite that much.
Yeah. I mean,
so Tom, are you saying that kind of both approaches that Aubri and I are taking is wrong? It might be wrong. Like the idea that you're telling them they're going to come up with the cash might not work, and the idea of leaving off the appraisal might not be either.
No, I'm sorry. I probably didn't communicate very clearly. I'm saying that coming up with the cash is a good strategy to demonstrate to the seller, because any listing agent worth their weight is going to ask the question about how much cash they're going to come up with. And any listing agent that's worth anything is also going to ask, hey, what are you, because there's a difference between, you've always said, Pete, right? There's a difference between willingness and ability. Okay. So if somebody's willing to put their money where their mouth is and say, hey, we'll cover up to. So what I generally do is try to go back from the listing side. I try to go back and negotiate a certain amount. So I'll say, okay, 10 grand, 5 grand, 7,500, whatever the number is, to try to get them to come up with that much cash. So at least we know where that is. But I always also try to put that, and again, this is being recorded, and we get right in that, walk right up to that line in weird markets like this. But
you want me to stop the recording for a minute?
Yeah, well, I mean, I of course would never do anything illegal, but one might just not have that addendum necessarily be in that appraiser's hands about that difference in the cash makeup. Because if you put the addendum out there and it says seller will come up or buyer will come up with $10,000 shortage on an appraisal, and you put that in the body of your counter, good luck. Talk about begging the question. So I would never put that in the counter in my document. I would put it in an addendum to the contract, and I would have them executed simultaneously. So I wouldn't ultimately be have that be an impediment. We are obligated to provide lenders with all the information that they ask for as it relates to the transaction, and of course we always do. And if they ask for information as it relates to the transaction, then we provide that. So that's the way that I would approach it.
So Aubri,
did I answer your question, Pete? Or did that address the issue? Or
I think so. I think, it's hard because when you're on the buy side, you have a different thinking. You want the house. And when you're on the sell side, you want to hook your wagon to the strongest person. So, it's just different thinking. And I think, Jen and I just want to do what's best in every situation, obviously, for our clients.
I'll say it this way. I have had lots of people challenge us on whether that saying that you didn't put the property must appraise when we try to utilize our financing contingency. Okay. I will tell you, we have never lost. We have never lost legally. So
that's good knowledge. That's great.
So doesn't mean that we can't, but we haven't. And I just think it's hard in today's environment to write must appraise, because you might have a seller that's fairly bright and you might have an agent that's not. And it just gives you one more foot in the, in the well. You're falling down almost before you're getting up. I just think it makes it really hard to win. And we're assuming that the agent on the other side has enough moxie to appreciate the issue. And in many instances, they don't. And that's not being deferent. It's not being punitive to anybody. I'm not trying to pass judgment. It's just a reality that we see. And I can tell you, we've had some disputes over earnest deposits. I'm not aware of an earnest deposit we've ever lost because the buyer did not follow through on the contract because the appraisal was short. I'm not aware of that. If we have had one, I am unaware of it, but it's possible, I guess. I'd be curious if anybody's ever had a seller or a buyer lose an earnest deposit. Now, I suppose if they didn't fight it, but have we ever had a buyer? Has anybody ever had a buyer lose an earnest deposit because the property did not appraise and they didn't think the fight was worth it, or the seller made enough of a stink, or it did go to arbitration or mediation? I'd be curious. I'm not aware of one, but I'd be curious to know if there is one. Does that make sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, if you guys have any other questions on that, ask them now, and or do a shout out to me later, and I'll get Tom into the questioning and get some answers. So Elizabeth McClellan had a question, and then Kathy said she also had the same question. How do you advise your sellers in terms of how home conditions should be when they turn over to buyers? Cleaning, patching holes, just curious expectations that you set.
Yeah. Again, this is where we can shine over most agents, right? So it's great that we have the opportunity to educate others on stuff, but I think most of us encourage our sellers: vacuum, dust, wipe, fill nail holes, and paint with matching paint. How many times have you guys had an issue in the 11th hour because the buyers are upset with the condition of the home and push closing back? Or I know some of you guys buy like a cleaning service time when their sellers move out, which I think is phenomenal. That's such a great gift to your sellers. But definitely, we have a little card that we make for sellers, and okay, your house is under contract, now what? And it has a bunch of like little bullet points with dates that they can fill in. Here's the possible inspection, the date, you can fill it in. Here's the appraisal. Here's the termite inspection. Here's when you meet with the title company to sign your documentation. Make sure you leave all the keys on the countertop with the garage door opener. Make sure the house is clean. So that's on their bullet point checklist for them.
One of the things that we've done on the buyer's side, and I don't know if anybody's doing this on the buyer's side, in a multiple offer, is that the buyer is offering to the seller the 1 to 2 days post occupancy, but also $500 for having the house cleaned and carpets cleaned, whatever the amount is, depending upon the size of the house. And that's been really very well received in a multiple offer where all other things kind of are almost equal.
Yeah, that's a really creative and give somebody a case of the feel goods, right? Like, oh, that's really kind of
off our plate. We're going to give you the time and we're going to give you the money. And, we haven't had a fight yet to say, somebody moved out and, we've had to go after. I think it's such a good faith offer that it's something that they think about and just maybe don't want to do, don't have the time to, or don't have the money to. So I think that's a good strategy on a multiple offer also. I have 2 people that have raised their hand, Raquel and then Gina Stearns. So Raquel, you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I was just going to go back to what Pete and Aubri and Tom were talking about in regards to the finance, and I completely see both sides of it, and I agree with what Tom was saying. It's just something that hasn't been litigated yet. But in reference to the financing portion of a contract, and this is extremely important, I think, as a buyer's agent, like Aubri was saying, cross the T's and dot the I's to make sure that you are giving the seller all of the information. And then as a seller's agent, it's so important to look at that financing paragraph and really truly understand what are the terms of the contract. What kind of financing is this buyer getting, and does it make sense? I mean, if you all of a sudden see something that says, let's say they're only putting 3% down and it's conventional, do you want to call the lender and make sure that that truly is a product that they offer? Or why are they only putting 3% down? Or if they're, do they need closing costs? Or what are the terms of the financing, and does it, is it valid? Because if all of a sudden interest, rates raise a week after you guys get the contract signed and they haven't locked in yet, you know, you could be losing out on contracts because the buyer can no longer get financing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I just wanted to point out that it's extremely important that all of that information is filled in, and that as a seller's agent, you realize what terms and conditions the buyer is truly, you know, what kind of financing they're actually taking advantage of. So just a point.
Cool. Gina, you had a question?
Yes, well, it's two parts. One is referring to what she just mentioned, which is are people in general calling in this crazy frenetic market? Are people still calling lenders to ask about this file, this buyer, this?
Mm-hmm. You should.
Okay, but then where, like, other than what she just mentioned, the terms, like they can't really, I'm just kind of realizing over the last 3 years, they can't really tell you much about the kind of risk they are, right? That's
You're right. One thing I call the lender, if, obviously if I can reach him during business hours or whatever, and I just say, hey, I have a contract here from Jane Smith, and I'm just curious to know if she has submitted her financials to you yet. That's a good question to ask, because we all know pre-qualification is different than pre-approval, but just slightly so. I know Pete has mentioned that before, and it's not really worth much more than the paper it's on, but you want to make sure that that buyer has submitted their financials, their bank statements, their pay stubs. So at least the lender can give you that. You know, and I've had lenders tell me, oh yeah, over 800 credit score, her debt to income is 43%. So blah, blah. And they tell me stuff they shouldn't tell me, but that's okay. You want to at least make the call and try to get as much information for your seller as you possibly can. Plus, make sure that that number with the lender that you're calling has a 402 on it. I can't tell you how many times with a 1-800 number and I get sent to a call center in Minneapolis and an extension, and I can't get a hold of that lender when I need them. So I really think for your seller's benefit, you should work with a local lender. I think that makes you more competitive as a buyer too, to show that. I even write that in paragraph 10C, buyers pre-approved with a local lender, pre-approval letter attached to offer. I don't think that sellers realize that you're going to have a much better experience with Dundee Bank than you would with Citibank, unless you point it out in paragraph 10C.
Absolutely. And then my other, thank you, Aubri. My other question was for Tom. Tom, could you repeat when you said that something needs to be handled in an addendum executed simultaneously versus in a counter? I got a little lost right then. Were you talking about this appraisal contingency language?
Yeah, I was specific. Thanks for the question, Gina. I was specifically talking about if the buyer is willing to make up some of a potential appraisal shortage in cash and is contractually obligating themselves to do so, that if it's placed in the counter offer, it almost begs the question for a short appraisal versus if it were in an addendum that doesn't necessarily accompany the purchase agreement, which may or may not be part of the appraiser's information.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, do you mind if I cram in a few more things? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Keep going, Aubri. We could just keep on going forever here, but
I'm on number 9. I don't think I even numbered these for you guys, but number 9 of 10 things that were cool this year. It's been helpful for me to be known for a consistent thing, or at least I'm under the impression I'm known for a consistent thing. Just implement something into your business that's uniquely you. I feel like mine are funny sign writers and also pre-inspected listings. So just be the agent that's always known for that one thing. Like, you know, Carol, you had mentioned helping with buyers with the cleaning service. I think that's awesome. Not heard of that before. That's uniquely you. And then my number 10 is Raquel, I'm so glad you spoke earlier because you're actually on my piece of paper here. I love trying to get our family bigger with better family. So anytime you're working with an agent that you really like, pull them over here. I don't even try to make it a businessy thing. I just call them and say like, I called because I think you're so great. And I'm wondering if you can please come work over here. And I seriously say it just like that. That's how Kristen Leal got here, and Raquel and Oscar and all these agents that we love so much. And I'm learning from all of you guys. Let's just make our pool bigger and invite those agents to come hang out and talk with us. So those are my 10 things. And then I wanted to take a quick minute to talk about how to get a couple ideas to get your buyers to win on competing offers. Okay, so we all kind of know the things of writing the letter, right? But there's from the buyer to the seller, but there's a couple of things I think you could put into your letter that might really help you. So when I'm taking buyers through the showing of the house, I'm looking for clues like, oh, they are Packers fans and they went to wine country last year. I'm looking at their photos, jerseys in their closets, all that kind of stuff. Because guess what? When your buyer writes their letter, now that they're Packers fans and they also love wine country. And I know it's maybe a little, sneaky, but if you can create like cool things where they would have a like kind items to discuss, put that in the letter. I think that's really helpful. When you're writing an offer as a buyer's agent, you want to appeal to two different minds, the analytical Excel spreadsheet person and the artistic emotional person. So you can take care of the analytical spreadsheet person with the numbers, right? Like you can offer over asking, you can be willing to pay the difference between the appraisal. What I would encourage you to do is also use the numbers to appeal to that emotional person. So what I've been doing lately is I'm picking a special date for my buyers. So this last offer is actually with Marissa Montalvo, who is just about the most wonderful new agent. I'm so impressed by her. But we wrote an offer that our buyers, their wedding anniversary was August 1st. I think I'm remembering this right. So our offer was whatever, $170,801. And in that letter to the seller, we said, hey, you might notice that our offer ends in kind of a strange number. Well, there's a special meaning behind that. Our anniversary was August 1st, and that day has always brought us a little bit of luck. We're hoping it brings us some luck today in being the new owners of your home. And it just so happened that Marissa's clients also had a special connection with those numbers. It was the weirdest thing, and it really tugged at the seller's heart. And she told me that was a factor in us getting the home. And I think there were 6 other offers. So don't be afraid to use a little luck to appeal to that emotional mind. And let's see here, large earnest deposit. In 10C, I throw a bunch of stuff in there. I throw the buyer's pre-approved with the local lender, closing date negotiable to seller's liking. And then I also try to ask the listing agent in advance, hey, do your sellers, would they benefit from a day of post-occupancy? And I make sure to point that out in paragraph 10C. Don't be a jerk and give a 4-hour response time to a listing agent. That doesn't help. Whenever I get that as a listing agent, I'm like, okay, now you're trying to take away the control that I've worked so hard with my sellers to establish. We're not going to be following your crazy short window of time. Let's see here. I want to make sure I covered everything. Oh, do you guys pay towards the seller's closing costs? Have you guys talked about that already as a buyer? And we can talk about that more, but I don't know if that was like
our buyers offer that too.
Okay.
Yes. And I think many do at this point, but go ahead and speak to it.
So if you're whipping out the best offer ever, you want to try to offer a little bit over the asking with that special luck number on the end. You want to do your 1% earnest deposit. You put in your paragraph 10C stuff, and in 10C, if your buyers are able, if they have the cash, I write the verbiage, buyers agree to pay $5,000 towards the seller's closing costs. And again, because we have so many new agents in our industry right now, you really want to call that agent and explain to them the benefit of that. Because instead of increasing the price of a $200,000 home to $205,000, which we could risk a low appraisal, but it also hurts the seller because now they're paying commission on $205,000, they're paying title insurance on $205,000, state doc stamps. Whereas if we keep the price at $200,000 in this example and pay $5,000 towards the seller's closing costs, that's $5,000 that they will guaranteed they will have for sure, no matter what happens with the rest of the deal. So that's been really helpful too. So that's kind of like the ultimate offer is higher price towards the closing costs, local lender, good earnest deposit, write a good letter with a little good juju in it too.
So I think that's a really, really good point that you're talking about these things, because one of the things that I really believe in is educating the buyer and the seller both on risk mitigation, that's the thinking is, and so much of it, and I'm not sure how much you spoke to this, but is that phone call to the seller's agent before writing an offer. And in that conversation, which can, and the more personal and and feeling conversation that is, the more information you get about the seller, about what are the biggest risks that they're concerned about. And that's exactly the things that you're speaking to too. So are there any other things that you do in the direction of risk mitigation? Because that's the most important piece that I think that you have to be thinking, what are the risks that the seller sees here in order to mitigate them?
Yeah. So as far as risk management with buyers, it's all in that initial buyer's appointment. You need to tell them we're going to lose 2 or 3 homes before we get one to stick. And I promise it will still work out. How much money do you have to put down on the house? And I mean down payment, closing costs, and extra funds, to where if we have to, we can contribute towards the seller's closing costs. Are you comfortable with the idea of letting the sellers live in your house for 1 day after you legally own it? Just preparing them at that buyer's appointment. And I can't tell you how many times like buyers will leave that initial appointment and they kind of have this like relieved, overwhelmed look on their face, like you just unloaded a ton of information on them. But now they're prepared more prepared than 90% of the buyers that are out there looking for homes, because the win, there's no negotiating right now. The win is getting the home. And we just want to get them a safe home that's in good condition. And I would like to say for a fair price, but maybe next year that'll be our year for that to happen. And then sellers mitigating risk there. I wholeheartedly believe in that pre-inspection. And then that verbiage about protecting them if the appraisal comes in low. I feel like those have been the 2 best things for my clients this year.
As in a multiple offer, and this is something I thought about with a VA buyer who feels like they're kind of not in the best position as far as multiple offers. And so we've been having conversations with VA people. Just because they can get 100% financing doesn't mean they don't have money, money. So having them think in the direction of how better can you use that money to make your offer look better, which would be making up the difference in an appraisal, taking care of the sellers, having their home cleaned. Anything that they can do with that money that they're not having to put into a down payment gives you a completely different negotiating position. Have you done that with VA buyers? Brought that to the table?
Yeah, I'm doing a deal with Kim Bills right now, who's, if you guys ever get a chance to work with her, if she ever brings you a contract on a listing, take hers, because she's very good at what she does. But yeah. I had the buyer on it. It was a VA buyer. We tried to do the whole paying towards the seller's closing cost thing. I did not know this. You can't do that as a VA buyer. So yeah, we had to be a little bit creative with, so the inspection turned up some issues, kind of more expensive issues. And so, hey, there we go. We can just use that money that we were going to use towards the seller's closing costs, and we're just going to take care of our own repairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or taking care of anything that comes up on VA appraisal costs. We also, I asked the lender if we could do that, and she said, yes, you can. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that we've got to be super creative about. I love all just this outline that you're giving. It's very succinct. So anybody else have any questions here? I'm seeing one chat thing here.
Oh, there's Kim. Hey, Kim.
Thank you, and back at you.
She's awesome, you guys. Just an amazing agent.
You guys all are awesome. So anybody have any final words or any questions? Wow, we're right at 12:59.
Amazing. Just want to say it was amazing. Aubri, just amazing, and great job facilitating. Carol, I love the dialogue. I learned so much when we have our bright people. So many of you have so much to provide and offer. Aubri, thanks for being the conduit of it, but also thanks to everybody else for all the ideas, and thanks for facilitating, Carol. This is stuff that gets my juices going. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much.
Hey, next week, Raquel is going to head up a panel of, and anybody has anything to offer, please join us on FSBOs. Like how to be the person who finds the FSBOs, how to be the buyer's agent representative, how to do it. So I really want to see all the rest of you. There was like 67, 70 on this call today.
Wow.
Really like really good turnout. Let's all show up again and again and again, because we're thinking real hard on what we put in front of you. This is not just okay, we're going to fill time. I really want to offer like the best of each one of us. That's what Agents Teaching Agents is about. And oh my God, it makes me want to just like cry. I miss you guys.
I'm very grateful for you guys, and thank you so much. Tom, you suck at taking compliments, but you're just the best. And thank you so much for being, at the head of our family, and grateful for everybody here.
Thanks.
Yes, all of you guys. Thanks so much. And thank you, Aubri. I know.
Thank you, Carol.
This was gold. Thank you.
Magnet.
Bye, you guys.
Thanks so much.